Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thanks for being here tonight for the inaugural talk show of Backstage Broadway. I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for coming down to join us tonight. The focus of this series really is about collaboration and inspiration, and talking to artists working in the field right now and about their collaborative process and their journeys, and what inspires them, what keeps that spark alive, as you'll see some of our guests tonight have multiple projects often going at once. So we're opening this talk series with Kiss Me Kate tonight, and in 2 weeks we'll be doing a panel with a couple of the stars from Be More Chill. So please come back and join us for that. That's on April 15th with Will Rowland, George Salazar, Stephanie Hsu, Jason Tam, and the composer and lyricist of that show, Joe Iconis. So that's in 2 weeks at 7 p.m. But tonight we're talking about Kiss Me Kate, which opened, the original production opened on Broadway, I want to say 1949, ran for over 1,000 shows, and had a notable revival in 1999 with Brian Stokes Mitchell and the late great Marin Mazzie. And the music director of that show is also the music director of the current revival of Kiss Me Kate, which is running up at Studio 54, Roundabout's home, starring Kelly O'Hara and Will Chase. The music director of that show has done, I think at last count, 6 million shows as a music director or supervisor. He is, I call him the grand poobah of musical directors, but actually what I call him is my dad. So I'd like to please welcome to the stage Paul Gemignani. Hi.
Hey, honey.
How are you?
Good to see you. Which chair? Okay.
Oh my goodness. Hello.
Hello.
So why don't we start with something simple like, where did you grow up? As if I didn't.
I haven't grown up, actually.
That's good.
I mean, it's obvious I'm still in the theater, so why would I have grown up? Anyway,
Yeah, right.
San Francisco, California, that area, Alameda, Oakland, that way. I went to school in that area. That's the east, that's the West Coast, for those of you who don't know where San Francisco is. And I did everything there until I was, let's see, about 24, and then I came east with a jazz singer. We stopped in Minneapolis, and I just, since I was that close to New York, thinking I would never be back that far again, right, from all the way out west, I took a train from Chicago to New York and saw my friend in Cabaret and got bitten by the old theater bug.
Yeah.
So I stayed.
You're the black sheep of your family until.
That's for sure.
I mean, what I mean is like, Pop and Graham didn't do much music. Graham played a little piano, right? I mean.
Yeah, there's no real music. I mean, my father's one of my father's brothers was a jazz saxophone player. That's about, and the composer Gemignani, spelled differently than we spell our name, is linked somehow to the family. But other than that, yes. Yeah.
So can you remember a time? I mean, you were a drummer. Was that your first instrument?
No, violin.
Violin. And then when did you switch over to drums?
Well, I played a lot of instruments, not well, but I played a lot of instruments during that time. I started in violin because that's the first instrument that they give you in grammar school because they don't have enough of them.
Right.
So they get, you'd be a great violinist there. So that happens. And then I got to high school and I decided to play the cello. The teacher said, we need a cello more than we need a violin. Would you consider? Sure, why not? And then left me out of the band. I wasn't in the band, so I decided to try and learn something in the band. I tried trombone, didn't like that. Tried trumpet, didn't like that. Tried French horn, didn't like that. Tried tuba in the marching band, too much to carry. So I ended up subbing, meaning they needed, we were playing music in the band concert that needed an extra percussionist, and so it was like mallets, and since I at least understood what a keyboard looked like, I was chosen. And that's how I got into percussion, and then I stayed there for the rest of my time.
And did you have any early aspirations about leading the band? Or what I'm hearing is like all of these experiences, even if they're brief, lead you to sort of a holistic view of what comes together to make an ensemble.
Yeah, I was always interested in conducting because, I don't know, it always seemed to be something that I was interested in. And in high school, the band director, I started out being a drum major for the band.
Right.
And then became, and then did a couple of did a couple of numbers on a concert, like at my graduation. I conducted Pomp and Circumstance, stuff like that, but nothing big. And I really was going towards classical music. And my conducting teacher in college, when I actually started to think I might want to really do this, but I wasn't thinking of show business. He encouraged me. I played in San Francisco when I was in college. I played in the opera orchestra and subbed in the symphony and did stuff like that. And he would, once in a while, after the second or third year I was taking from him, would put me up in the second act of an opera in the opera house, stuff like that. Really, really scary stuff. Anyway.
You mean on stage?
No, I mean, you put me up in the pit, and say, here, do the next, do the next little section of Carmen.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was really funny.
Terrifying.
To him, it was funny.
Yes.
But then I came to New York, and I had been doing little operetta things and Gilbert and Sullivan things in San Francisco as a conductor, and basically making my living in nightclubs.
As a drummer, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And came to New York, as I said, saw Cabaret and went, wow, that's something else. I never saw anything like that before. The only musical I had seen up to that point was Gypsy with My Mother, with Ethel Merman on the road, who walked through the performance, I might add. But it so got under my skin about how inventive it was. And I have to say, in not a derogatory sense, but it's something I thought, so I always tell people this. I didn't think the music was being performed as well as it could have been performed, which made me interested in maybe trying to get musicians to have an ego about what they did on Broadway, and it's not just a job. Because you don't get any help from anybody else if you're a musician on Broadway. The creative team, like the choreographer and those people, yes, but nobody else. No producer, no. Most directors don't know enough about music to really understand. Oh, the trumpets could sound a lot better, or the band could sound a lot better, or there's a level of involvement that the musician needs to bring to the theater to make the whole thing work the way it should work. So that highfalutin kind of thought. So I got a job that night from the musical director, Hal Hastings, to be the drummer and assistant conductor on the road of the road company of Cabaret, because he asked me, do you have a job? Where are you from? I told him, do you have a job? No, I'm just going to take the train back to Chicago and do something. Anyway, he said, well, how would you like to work your way back? And that's how I got started in the theater.
And you took Cabaret on the road?
I took Cabaret on the road.
As an assistant conductor and drummer?
But what I didn't know, and nobody told me, was that no assistant conductor living ever gets up to conduct on the road. Does not happen, but I didn't know that.
I just think it's so interesting. As you know, obviously, but we're both huge fans of jazz music, and you really started out in jazz as a drummer, and that is the sort of unspoken collaboration that's going on in a jazz ensemble, be it a quartet, a big band, a singer with a bass. I think there's a lot of crossover between what you do now as a music director and just the art of making a musical.
I think that's true. I think that the art of collaboration makes all music and all theater better, providing you do actually use and embrace the art of collaboration. If you're not collaborating in the theater, you're not in the theater. You're doing something else. I don't know what you're doing, but you're not doing the theater the way it should be. That goes for everybody in the theater: actors, dancers, musicians, whoever you are. And I'll give you one example, because then we'd be here till midnight if we kept talking like that. I love Studio 54 for one reason and one reason only. I mean, two, actually. The sound in there is terrific, depending on where you sit. But I love it for another reason. And this is the main reason I love it. The musicians see why they're playing. They see what they're playing for. They hear Kelly sing So in Love and see her perform it and see her character grow through the show. And that informs the way they play. Before that, I used to spend a lot of time telling, the Sweeney Todd comes to my mind, explaining each number, what it was, what was happening on the stage, because they couldn't see it. And when you figure that the main is called the musical theater, the main element in that sentence is musical. You put them in a hole 6 feet in the ground where they can't see a thing. You cover them over to make them sound like crap. And then you wonder why they're all angry all the time. So, but if you're going, a lot of these people, the people that I hire to play, I don't hire always the same people. I try and mix it up, and I also like young people in the band, and I like older people that can take care of those younger people when they go astray, shall we say. But to see their face light up means a lot to me, because they never really get credit for what they do. They spend a lifetime dedicated to this. And if you're a theater musician, you're not going to get rich. You're not going to get a big pension. You're not going to get much of anything, but to get to play your instrument and to enjoy the music that you fell in love with, that made you play the instrument in the first place. So that's why it's very, very important that you go up to the pit when you go to the theater and go, "Hi guys, how are you? Hi ladies and gentlemen, you sounded great." Because most of the time they're down there and nobody knows they're down there. Hamilton, the great hit of the century, is completely covered over except for a little hole like this, because Alex is small. Alex Lacamora, musical director. There's a little hole like this so you can get up and wave at the audience at the end so everybody can think that he's the only one down there, I guess. But it's completely covered over. So all those people that are playing, that wonderful musical don't, I don't want to belabor this, but you get the point. If they see it, they can relate to it and they play better. And there's a reason to play. Instead of just looking at a bunch of notes, doing this, and waiting for the intermission to come. Yeah.
Can you pinpoint a time where, it sounds like seeing Cabaret was incredibly influential when you saw it the first time. Can you talk about a time where you crossed paths with Steve's music? Or a memory of that
I was doing
Sondheim.
I'd never heard Sondheim music before.
Not Steve Jobs.
No, not Steve Jobs. I'd never heard his music before. I sort of knew who he was, but I didn't really. I know he wrote the lyrics to West Side. That's about the extent of my knowledge. Remember that I wasn't from the theater, so all that history I knew very little about. I knew South Pacific because my mother played it constantly in my house when I was growing up. That and Ima Sumac. I just wanted to see if anybody knew who Ima Sumac. I was in Los Angeles doing Zorba with Chita Rivera and John Raitt, believe it or not. And I forget the rest of the cast, but we were on the road, we were on a tour, because that's the next thing I did in New York. They called me back, and I played drums in Zorba in New York and told my boss, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not a drummer anymore. I'm a conductor, so just don't ask me anymore. And he sent me on the road as the conductor of Zorba. And somebody brought the record of Company in. We all traveled, I won't say we all, but most musicians travel with some kind of player. Now you have your phone. In those days, you had to take speakers and a turntable, right? So they made these compact things. I can remember, I can see it, because they gave me this album to take home, said, you should listen to this. This guy's really good, is what they said. So I told Steve this story. I took home to my apartment this record of Company and listened to it. I couldn't believe it was the American Theater. I'd never heard anything like that before. I'd never heard a storytelling like that. I never heard lyrics like that. I mean, West Side, but I didn't relate it to Steve. That's the first time I heard him.
Yeah.
And I was hooked by then.
Now, when you worked on Kiss Me Kate in '99,
Mm-hmm.
and
in 48. No.
And how did this? Could you talk a little bit about what makes these what makes these revivals different, and why do you what do you find interesting to keep exploring in this material?
First of all, the cast is totally different. That's
Right.
one thing, but it's fun to see different people take on different roles.
Sure.
That's one thing. The other thing is that the music is so rich. Cole Porter is known for his witty lyrics, but you show me a ballad that's as haunting and as heartfelt as So in Love today, or in the theater. In other words, it's been written in the last, maybe Not a Day Goes By, maybe something Steve wrote, maybe the very last 5 minutes of West Side. But in 1948, or probably if he wrote it, would be 1946 when he was writing it. That's one amazing thing. The other thing is how fresh this music sounds. You don't have to work hard to make this music sound great. That being said, I love theater artists. I love to collaborate with them. The two guys that are coming out here tonight are my favorite people in the theater. Warren Carlyle is an amazing, amazing choreographer. And if you go to see Kiss Me Kate, you'll see what I mean. But he cares about all elements of it. And that shows on the stage. He loves his dancers and the actors. He knows what to do with each person. You recognize each person in the show as a person because of the way he choreographs and the way he thinks about it. And one of the hardest jobs outside of the orchestrator in the theater is the dance arranger. It can be a thankless job. It can be a brilliant job, depending on how you look at it. David Chase happens to be one of those special people who, and I'm not saying this just because he promised to take me to dinner if I did. He is one of the most creative, truly in love with what he does people I've met in the theater. And, he wrote the dance music in '99. It's not totally different now, but it is a lot different now. And the spirit of it is a lot different now. So then you're back to collaboration again. The reason why it's different, the reason why it's interesting, the reason why it's a different take is because you collaborate in that direction, and we all the three of us sort of think alike. But I have to say that it's not very difficult to think and open up your mind and be creative with these two guys. So when you get to work with people like that, it's not very hard to be creative. Let me put it that way.
Yeah. Excellent. I'd like to bring out a friend to sing one of the songs from Kiss Me, Kate. My dear friend, Marissa McGowan, who you may have seen on Broadway in A Little Night Music. We did Les Mis together back, I don't know.
She played the old lady.
That's right. And she was also on Broadway in Bonnie and Clyde. And she's understudying Kelly in the current production of Kiss Me, Kate. And I just think it's lovely that we're seeing her performance and Preston's later on this evening. Because Broadway has not had a chance to see it yet. So I'm excited to welcome Marissa McGowan to the stage, accompanied by the fabulous Mark Mitchell.
Strange, dear, but true, dear, when I'm close to you, dear, the stars fill the sky, so in love with you. Fold about you, you know, darling, why so in love with you am I, in love with the night mysterious, the night when you first were there, in love with my joy delirious, when I knew that you could care. So taunt me and hurt me, deceive me, desert me. I'm yours till I die. So in love, so in love, so in love with you, my love. So taunt me and hurt me, deceive me, desert me. I'm yours till I die. So in love, so in
Marissa McGowan. Mark Mitchell. Fantastic. Our next guest is, gosh, I've known him for many, many years, but we'll talk about how we know each other when he gets out here, because I can't quite remember exactly where it was. But he's choreographed, I think, roughly 8 or 9 shows on Broadway, directed and choreographed 5 in addition. He won a Tony Award for After Midnight for his choreography. And if you make it uptown to see Kiss Me Kate, which obviously you all will be running after this performance to buy tickets, you will see, as my dad mentioned, his extraordinary, extraordinary work on the show. He's also just a beam of light as a human. I'm thrilled to welcome to the stage Warren Carlyle. Hey, bud.
Thank you. Love you.
Yeah, you too, bud. Have a seat. When did we first, was it the movie of the producers? Is that how we know each other?
I think that's the first.
Yeah.
That's the
I was
first.
convict number 8, I believe, in that film.
I was assistant number 3.
Oh, well, there we go. So, Warren, where did you grow up?
I grew up in a small town on the east coast of England, a place called Norwich.
Okay.
It's about 4 hours from London.
And did you study dance there as a kid, or when did you start?
I was hyperactive.
Okay.
My poor mom. I was extremely hyperactive, and I ran track, and I did swimming and horseback riding. And one day I saw the movie of Top Hat, and I literally pointed to the screen and said that, like I want to do that. I was 10.
Wow.
And my mom, God love her, took me to the local church hall. It's a village of 50 people, and in the back of the church hall, I did my first shuffle step. And then a year later, I got a full scholarship. Actually, much like Billy Elliot.
Wow.
A year later, I had a full scholarship, a free ride to a ballet school in London, and off I went.
Wow.
And then 10 West End shows later, 1 ballet company, 10 West End shows later, I took the leap and moved to New York.
Wow.
20 years ago.
Thank
So
God.
Yeah, no kidding. So you were a child dancer. I mean, that's amazing. I think that's incredible. So Top Hat, yes, great choice. So in this little town that you grew up in, was there a dance school or a teacher, or were you learning from, how did that work?
Yeah, there was a teacher. There was a really strict, good, kind teacher who really made a difference in my life, actually. She was really good. She was the person that just said, go, you should do this.
That's incredible. What was your first, so you came to New York after working in the West End and in ballet companies overseas. What was the first Broadway show you saw?
I saw Will Rogers' Follies in 91. I came on vacation
Sure.
in 1991, and I saw City of Angels, Will Rogers' Follies, and I saw Cats, because at that time actually I was performing in Cats in the West End.
Oh my goodness.
So I got a free ticket to see Cats, and I went to the Winter Garden and I saw Cats.
Incredible.
And City of Angels, which I would love to do.
Yeah, I was about to say,
Let's see if that could happen.
Yeah, no kidding. It needs a revival for
It does,
sure.
right?
Right? City of Angels?
Yeah.
Great, what a great
Like
story.
Homer.
Yeah.
So, okay, great. So, did you find any? I mean, it sounds like you were pretty determined from a young age that you were going to dance. Was there a moment that you can pinpoint where you said, I want to be creating my own work? Or how did that start to come on your radar, to choreograph
I think it
your
was
own
almost a first memory. In a funny way, almost one of my earliest memories is certainly listening to music. I had a Sony Walkman, and I used to listen to these cassette tapes, and I used to imagine people dancing. Before I even knew
Wow.
what dance was, I think.
Wow.
I just had a want to do that. And now actually I sit in my apartment and I look at the wall and I listen to music and I imagine people dancing.
That's
It's
amazing.
really a lot of years later, that's what I do for a living.
I think that's so incredible. I mean, I think it's also so important. I mean, I'm looking at 2 artists who I think, and when David comes out, 3, who I think in my opinion, one of the great qualities that connects all of you is this sense of play in your work, like the sense of discovery and wonder, almost as if it's that energy of let's just make a play together, and tapping into that Dad, what you were saying about musicians playing for the reason that they started playing, and it sounds like tapping into that childhood sensibility opens you up and gives you, feeds you still.
It's that childlike wonder That's what I love most about what we do. It's what Paul has. You know, when there's a great piece of music, if you had seen his face the first time the orchestra ever played, and I went not to do my work and like listen to what they were going to play or listen to the dance music or the charts or anything like that. I went to see his face because that only happens once, you know, the first time that the bow ever hits the string or the fingers hit the keys. It's like this. It's such a magical thing, and Paul has the same childlike wonder. I like to look up at things. Mm-hmm. You know, I like to sit cross-legged and literally look up at it. But also in my work, I like to celebrate those dancers, each and every individual. I like to celebrate this music. Yeah. This score, this Cole Porter. So my collaborators are this great man here, David Chase, Cole Porter. He's the other chair on the end here. You know, it's like that's who I get to be in the room with. That's an amazing. Boy, is it easy to have childlike wonder with this and with this and with Cole Porter. It's easy to look up at something like that. It's easy to celebrate.
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautifully said. If you had to pinpoint your break into the theater, what would you think that would be?
I think the thing that changed my life was a show called Oklahoma.
Yeah.
That was if there was a turning point. I've choreographed and directed for as long as I can remember. I've told stories for as long as I can remember. But Oklahoma, I had a chance I was Trevor Nunn's associate director at the Royal National Theatre, and I was Susan Stroman's associate choreographer. And in the cast was a very young, not yet 30 actually, was Hugh Jackman as Curly, and Shula Hensley, who's a wonderful New York actor, won the Tony actually for his performance as Judd. And I got to be in the room suddenly with those people, and I realized there was something really good out there. There was something that was possible for me. And those people have continued to encourage. Actually, Stroman has been a big mentor of mine and has encouraged me along my way. And Trevor Nunn too. Trevor Nunn, when he comes and sees everything that I do, Trevor always writes a letter, a handwritten letter. Those people have been important to me. But Oklahoma, I think, was a turning point. And it was the thing that allowed me to come to America too. You know, with Stroman, I came and did a movie called Center Stage in 1999, a really great kind of cult, now it's a cult, sure. A dance movie called Center Stage that we shot in New York. So I spent 3 glorious months in New York with both companies, New York City Ballet and ABT. And 20 years later, last year, I just got to choreograph at City Ballet for the first time. That was an amazing return. Really, it took me 20 years to get in the door. Like I've been knocking on that door for 20 years. And I finally got to.
Yeah, great.
But yeah, so I mean, Oklahoma was a big deal. It was the thing that allowed me to come to America. When I came to film Center Stage, I met a wonderful lady called Gwen Verdon. And then Gwen Verdon, of course, changed my life once again because she welcomed me into the family of Fosse. So I learned Fosse on Broadway. I went back to the West End and staged it there. And while I was doing Fosse, Stroman came and said, I have a new show with Mel Brooks. It's called The Producers. I'm directing and choreographing, and she said, I need someone I can leave in the other room. I need someone I can leave with the dancers. I need someone I can trust. So I moved here for 6 months only. I came for 6 months, and I am still here. I am still here.
Now, now sort of skipping ahead to the present day for a second, how valuable is that? I mean, obviously having those mentors or those people who shepherd your career or who say to you, like, you're good, I believe in you, you can do this thing that you want to do, go ahead and do it. Obviously, it sounds like it started with this dance teacher in your hometown. But also, now that you are an established and successful and extremely busy choreographer and director, have you found those people for yourself? Like, and do you think about your own relationship to Stro back when she was like, I need someone in that other room? Like, Yeah. You know, I just think it takes a lot of trust, frankly. I mean, it speaks to your ability and your open-heartedness and your talent, frankly, that somebody as creative and as much of a leader as Stroman is, to be able to say, I trust you in this room. You know, that's a huge thing. And so that's I don't know, maybe I'm just celebrating you for that, but I think that's really interesting.
Now when I think about it, I think she makes it look really easy. I think it's an incredibly difficult art form. It's difficult to get right, and there's a million things that can make it go right or wrong. And she's someone that she just just makes it look easy. Directing looks easy, the choreography looks easy, the collaborations look easy. And when you really have to do it, it's actually not always easy.
Yeah.
That's why when you get the good ones,
yeah.
you hang on to them. Or you look in a Broadway playbill and you wonder why it's like the same designers and the same director and the same choreographer over and over again. It's because you find people that you can do this with, and you hold them close. And there's a great freedom in, we know each other.
Yeah.
We've done this a couple of times. I would never have to worry about offending Paul.
Right.
I would just say, wait, is it a 1 or a 3? What, you want it on a 3? Are you nuts? That's actually the joy of the collaborations, that we've done it a couple of times. So you do hold those people close.
I have two responses and questions to that, which is, it requires a great deal of vulnerability, I think. I mean, I think it has to require, which is why I think when you find something that works so well, you crave that process again, right? You crave the people, your people, your tribe that you can make work with. But as a person I know who works on multiple things, which is harder for someone doing 8 shows a week, not that you're not working on multiple things, but it's once the show is opened, you're free to go work on another
Unemployed.
project. Yeah, right, exactly. So how do you navigate between, say, the Dream Team and another I'm not even imagining another specific project, but just saying, like, how do you navigate the different kinds of collaborative styles? There are I don't know. I was recently, I music directed the Merrily Roll Along, and our choreographer Lauren Lataro is fantastic. Was talking. She was working on 2 projects at the same time, ours and another show, and both were very rewarding to her. But she described the processes as completely different, and she's sort of, she's great.
She's wonderful.
So I'm curious, like, how you feel about when you have to sort of like put on a different hat, or even if you're going from a position of where you're just choreographing something into a position where you're directing something as well, or how that all works for you, or you just approach it the same way, or what do you think?
I think I make myself listen. I think it's the most important skill. Is no matter what you're saying, I have to hear it. I still have to have my own opinion about it, and ultimately I'll decide what I want to do, but I gotta hear what you're saying, and that's as an actor, that's as a director, that's as a musical director, that's as a pal, a rhythmical pal, a musical rhythmical pal. I have to hear what Paul says. I have to hear what David Chase says. Ultimately, I'll figure out what I want, but I gotta hear it. And I feel that's in every role that I play. That's as a choreographer, I have to hear Scott Ellis. If Scott Ellis says to me twice, that number's too long, I gotta hear it. I gotta make a cut. And if someone gives me a note, they're not always correct on the note, but there's something about that moment that's not right. So I gotta hear it. So I've learned over the years to stay my enthusiasm, or to stay my when I'm really sure about something. I sometimes now I'll make a slower decision. I used to make very quick decisions, I think, and now I'll make a slightly slower, more considered decision.
Does that just come with experience, you think?
Yeah, I think it's just age. I do. I think it's just age. I do. I think that's life, right?
Yeah.
It's life. And I think as you get older, or as you grow older in this business, you learn just to be slightly more considered.
I'd just like to add one thing to that.
Yeah, please.
Which is the extreme, you said vulnerable, and that's a good word. I think also honesty goes in there. Honesty meaning that when you're working with, like these guys that I've worked with now too many times, enough times, I don't shadow, or I don't monitor anything. If I feel something, I say it, because I know that that not only will they listen, but they'll take it in the right way, so that I'm not criticizing his work or he's not criticizing mine. It is a collective passion to get this as correct and wonderful as it can be, okay? The difference between, that doesn't happen very often. You don't want to say that because you work with a lot of different people in this business, but that does not happen very often. And when it does, it's a gift. When it doesn't, you can't change. I mean, you still have to have the passion. You still have to have the honesty. You still have to have the commitment to make whatever you're doing, whatever that thing is, the best you can possibly do it. And if you're getting fought on all sides, it's not easy. But we've all been there, and we're going to be there more times. So that's just part of the game.
Yeah,
Right?
I agree.
Yeah. So Warren, specifically with Kiss Me Kate, had you ever worked on anything from the show before, or were you fresh to the show when Scott
new.
asked you to do it?
Brand new. I was a newbie,
Great.
complete newbie. And it's the first Cole Porter I've ever done.
Oh, cool.
Really, truly, the first time. And then I took great joy in it, actually.
You can tell.
Great
Tell
joy
them
in every, even something as simple as dee da 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 da, strange dear but true dear. I can't believe how great that is. I can't believe how great it is that melody would go dee da da dee da, and the lyric would go strange dear but true dear, and the cadence of the language and the marriage of the music. I just was, bless you, I was nuts about it.
Cool.
Really nuts about it, and it really excited me. It was really like doing a brand new show. Like, it was really a page turner. I would turn the page and it was like, this is great.
Yeah. Did you have, again, we can talk a little bit more about this when David gets out here too, but did you have a jumping off point for this? Did you find a thing that spoke to you thematically, or did you find, how did you start building stuff?
David Chase, it's David's fault. He said, this show is about the battle of the sexes. He said, this is about the battle of the sexes. And I spent a really good week. Like, we had a really solid week together at Ripley Greer in a studio. And he just said that in every sequence is battle of the sexes. And that was it was something that really stuck with me. So when I worked on every single number, there's really evidence of that in every single number. And
Absolutely.
It creates delicious tension. If the men do a section, guess what? The women are going to do better. And if the women do better, guess what the men are got to do? The men are got to do better. So it creates this kind of atmosphere of healthy sexual competition, but it also allows those numbers to climb. So something like Too Darn Hot is a 10-minute, 45-second climb. It's like this jumbo jet that just goes and goes and goes and goes. And it was born out of David's thought of battle of the sexes, because that's all it is.
Yeah.
It's all it is.
And,
and Tom, Dick, and Harry is the same thing. Cantiamo, the grape dance, is the same thing. It's these beautiful women, but there is a push and pull. There is a kind of tension in everything. And the one number that was not a battle, it's Bianca in Act 2. And I wrote in my script, Warren, WC, don't try too hard. Because I felt that I'm a trier, I'm a good man, and I try hard, and I want to do good work. So in all of these numbers, from the opening, I tried hard, because it's like the first words of the play, and like the first dance is very important to me. So I tried hard. And then Tom, Dick, and Harry, it's like I have these three gorgeous guys and Stephanie. I got to do good for them. So then I tried really hard with these solos. And then I get to Cantiamo, and I was like, oh man, grapes and harvest, and what does that mean? And it's love, and it's this, that, and the other. I got to try hard. And then top of Act 2 is like, holy shit, I've really got to try hard. And then Bianca, I was like, oh, everybody just has to take a breather. And the play has to take a breather too.
Yeah.
Because, on stage is the battle of the sexes between Will and Kelly, and backstage is another battle, and then the numbers are battling. So I got to like the 3/4 mark in Act 2, and I was like, oh my God, please, just no one battle. Let's just take a breather. Let's have a beautiful charm number. Bianca is a charm number. And boy, I made like a 5 out of 10. Like, I looked at it on that first preview, and I was like, oh no, I just did 5 out of 10. Not even a 7, like not even a good, and something I could sneak under the radar. So I went to work on it, and it became not a battle of the sexes, but it became a very kind of visceral, like, this is how much I love you. I'm going to show how much I love you, and I'm going to do this. And just when you think I've done enough, guess what? I'm going to prove how I love you even more. And then just when you can't think of anything else I can do, I'm going to do this one more thing. And that was born out of me sitting in that seat, looking at the set, and all I could see was the underneath of this platform. And I was like, I've danced everywhere else. Like, I looked around and just thought I'd been everywhere else. I kept seeing this thing, and I was like, oh, now I have to put his feet, somehow I have to put his feet up there. And that was born the upside down tap dance, kind of. Yeah, so that was something that was not Battle of the Sexes, but ended up being a kind of a more percussive kind of declaration of love, if you like.
Yeah, and it works
David
beautifully.
Chase. But
Yeah.
it was the seed of it was David Chase, was him saying Battle of the Sexes. And if I overlay that organizing principle over every single musical number in the play, it generally works.
I mean, I would agree 100%. And I just want to sort of name, since we're talking about collaboration and how it works for people, the open-mindedness and the openness of you in those moments with David in rehearsal room, where he's just throwing this thing at you, your reception of that and your not questioning of it, as you said, like naming the listening and just saying like, I hear you and here's my response to that. And here's all this great choreography.
Or it's like tennis, it's like, it's just finding people that you love playing tennis with.
Yeah.
I hit the ball over the net, Paul's gonna hit it back, and boy, is it gonna have a spin on it. Like, I can't wait.
Yeah.
I can't wait. And quite often I would work on things and like bring him and show him, like what do you think? Like that was the greatest joy for me was moments where I was able to do that, and other moments where I was able to be a 45-year-old sweaty mess hanging on the piano in my tap shoes trying to figure out what I was doing. Like we had some great, that tap break in Bianca will forever live in my memory.
Yeah.
Because I was holding the piano like this, and I was trying to get that was a pretty special
Amazing
moment.
So exciting. Okay, well, let's get our trifecta going, right? Our next guest, we've now named many times, has been one of my favorite musicians since I started doing show business. He's done, 35, 40 shows on Broadway as
also a conductor.
As a music director and conductor and arranger and supervisor. He's really smart. He went to Harvard, but I'll let him tell you about that. And we just worked together on the revival of Carousel. And he's represented on Broadway right now in Kiss Me Kate and Tootsie, I believe.
Yes.
Please, my old friend, David Chase. Have a seat, bud.
Hey.
Hey, pal.
Hey,
Where are you from?
I'm an Army brat.
Oh, really?
You didn't know that?
I think that rings a vague bell. but-
No, my dad was born and raised on a mountaintop in West Virginia, and my mother was a city girl from West Virginia. They met at college, and after they graduated from WVU, my mother-in-law said to him, "What are you doing? You're not going to go back and be a farmer, be a doctor." But who was going to pay for it? Well, the Army paid for it. So I ended up living all over the place, mostly outside of D.C. was sort of where I grew up. And my mother had been a pianist as a kid, and actually my dad's mom had been the church pianist at a little church on a mountaintop in West Virginia, self-taught. So there was music in my background, but basically I have no musical training. So
Awesome.
yeah.
So why did you play at a young age? Because you had family who did, or?
Well, I was forced to take piano lessons, which I hated every minute of.
Awesome. That's great.
And so I finally, by 8th grade, convinced my mother to let me quit, at which point I started playing piano. Because then it was fun, and I also had a fantastic high school drama teacher and I was mostly a performer in high school and college, and it wasn't until my degree is in biology, because why not? But when I realized that I didn't want to go to medical school right away, I said, well, I can play piano, so I'll do that for a while until I can figure out what to do with my life. I still have not figured out what to do with my life. So, and I'm still playing piano and making music. So, but hearing Paul talk about cabaret, I do have a very specific memory in high school of this wonderful drama teacher, Joan Bettinger was her name, who we did cabaret my senior year, and I was in the show, but we all sat down at one point and watched the movie and realized, wait a minute, some of those songs are different. Why can't we sing those songs? And Joan Bettinger, to her credit, just went, okay, you take care of it. And that was the first time I remember I listened, and I found sheet music for some of them, but the sheet music didn't match what they did in the movie, so I made it match what it did in the movie, just listened to it, and then I didn't know, I could hear a clarinet there, so I wrote out a clarinet part, and I could hear I'm sure it was really bad. But it was the first time that somebody had said, well, then go ahead and do it. And so I think that began my very healthy disrespect for musical theater.
So you got a biology degree, but did you at Harvard, correct?
Yes.
So it's not just a biology degree.
Well, it's still
It's a Harvard biology
It's a
degree.
liberal arts biology degree.
Okay.
Which means
I mean,
you
I
play
made sure-
piano while you're dissecting.
Exactly.
That's right.
Yes.
So when did you come from Boston? Did you come right to New York after college?
No, the first year out of college, I played classes at Boston Conservatory. I subbed at Forbidden Broadway and was playing in Boston. And I ended up, after doing that for about 6 months of subbing, the person who had been playing it decided to leave for New York, actually. And so I ended up doing Forbidden Broadway in Boston for 3.5 years. So that's actually where I kind of learned about Broadway, because if you know Forbidden Broadway, basically what it is a guy named Gerard Alessandrini, who's an actor who couldn't find work, basically started writing lyrics to existing Broadway songs to make fun of Broadway shows, and the latest Broadway shows, or skewering Carol Channing, or Liza Minnelli, or whoever. And they're all parody lyrics, but the goal, and it was 4 singers and a piano, and the goal of the piano was to sound as much like the original orchestration that you could hear on the cast albums would be. So that's when I started going, because I don't consider myself a pianist. I consider myself an orchestral reductor, if that makes any sense at all. Which is that the way that I think about piano, and the reason, and this is going to segue into why I love doing dance music, is that I don't think of it as, there are these notes. It's like, no, the bass is playing this, and I don't have drums, but if I kick the piano or if I flap the pedal, I can make noise that way. And and the rhythm section is playing the offbeats here, and if it's a brass fill, it's going to be ba-da, ba-da. Whereas if it's a woodwind fill, it might be a little different, And just all the way that it's voiced, and the way that it sounds, and the way that you use the piano to kind of convey that sort of energy, that all comes from having done Forbidden Broadway for 3.5 years and trying to sort of, again, be reductive to what I was hearing. So that it seems like it's a natural thing then to lead from that to say, okay, then as I'm playing with music, then I can make it sound a certain way, and I can hear what the orchestra would be playing before, like if nobody's orchestrated it yet, I can play the piano in such a way that then someone can listen and say, oh, I hear, you mean trumpets here, or you mean, and that very much informs the way that I think about how to approach music, which is it's always conveying to, for Warren, in a room figuring out a dance, it's all, I already hear the finished product in the way that he was saying he sees people dance. I hear what it's going to sound like before it's been orchestrated and played, or at least what I think it should sound like. It doesn't always end up that way.
He won't say this, but that is really unusual and weird. Because most dance arrangers are pianists, and the first thing that you say, and the first thing I will say, and I won't mention any names here, the first thing when I hear a dance arrangement, I usually say to myself is, it's too pianist. The orchestra will never be able to play that. That go through my head. And I start to figure out, how am I going to say to this person who has the ego of writing this music that what you just wrote, the orchestra can't play? I never have to say anything to him. I hear the orchestra. I know what the orchestration is going to be because I hear him play it. The other thing I'd like to say about him that he won't say is this is all done in his head. When he says he's not a pianist, he's not a pianist. He changes keys like this. This man is one of the most brilliant pianists in New York, Mark Mitchell. He can't transpose like this guy. Okay, can we go here? Can we go here, David? Oh yeah, sure. Boom, bang, boom, bang, boom. All that he poo-poos is just something he knows how to do. I want to tell you, that is really a special talent.
Well, thank you. One of the things that I think all of us, and I'm including, Mark and Marissa and Preston too, we're all in the business of communicating. And we have to, what's great about collaboration in a show, and as Paul said, sometimes it really works, and this one really works. Sometimes it doesn't. The goal, we all should have the same goal, which is to communicate something to you, the audience. And if we are successful, then you are going to take a journey with us. It may not be exactly the journey that we've imagined. So if you're, as an actor, if you're singing a song, you may be thinking something in terms of who you're singing about that you're not going to necessarily know that Marissa's maybe singing about her fiancé, Michael, who's somewhere in the audience, when she's singing So in Love. But it doesn't matter, because the fact that she can sing it that way and convey that, you're going to take your own journey. So what's great about us as collaborators, or what's great about a collaboration, is that we're all in the business of trying to communicate the best way possible. And sometimes that's through the power of the human voice, sometimes it's through the way that we move, sometimes it's through the way that you have a nice dramatic lighting on the brick wall in the back, and that gives you an energy and a mood. It's about the way that the nice rug here tells us we're in a very elegant place. It's all of those little things that are helping you take some kind of emotional journey with this. So I often say, and when I say I'm not a pianist, I play piano really well, but I'm a storyteller, and I use music as a tool. Warren is a storyteller. He uses movement and visuals as a tool. Paul is a storyteller. He uses the expression of the way things move in music and the way things move forward as his tool. As a performer, you use those tools of vocal expression. But the more that we're on the same page in terms of wanting to tell the same story, the better the experience can be. And that's why ego doesn't have to be involved in it, because we all should want the same goal, which is to tell the story in the best way possible, in the most exciting way, and the most effective way. So that's when I say I'm not a musician. It's like, yeah, I do music, but it's all serving a bigger purpose, hopefully, which is, and I will say that to me, one of the greatest sort of, you were saying that earlier that dance arrangers tend to be invisible. To me, that's a great compliment. If you can walk out of the theater and say, in the case of especially a revival, wow, they don't write shows like that anymore. And I know that they didn't write the show like that. then I've done my job, which is to make you think the experience was what it must have been in 1948. And the truth is, it's completely unrelated. And the music is completely different, and it's treated differently, and the movement is different, and the style of singing is different, but it's had the same visceral effect on you, the audience, in that moment that it hopefully had, or maybe not the same effect, but an equivalent effect that it would have had in 1948, and an equivalent effect it would have had in 1999. But we are in the commercial theater business, meaning that we have to communicate to you now. And if we do it in a way that's somewhat transparent or invisible, that's fine. So, sorry, that was a very long answer to where I grew up.
No. Okay. Skip ahead. Ruined my whole plan,
Okay.
David. Yeah. So, can you pinpoint, David, a time that was so wonderful, just so great, all of that, what you just said. Can you pinpoint a time, or a show, or a performance, or a piece of music? I don't know, dance arranging is such a specific thing, and I know you do other things in the music department, but it's such a specific thing, and as Dad pointed out, having had the benefit of working with you recently, it's like there's good dance arrangers everywhere, and then there's David Chase. Like, if you get David Chase, that's
right.
That's what it is, and that's no shade on any other dance arrangers. It's just like this is what it is. So, but it's such a specific kind of skill set, and I love what you're saying about how you storytell and how you play the piano. I envy that ability personally, but also just I wonder if there was a thing that you sparked in the way that Warren saw Top Hat, or Dad listened to that Company album, or saw Cabaret for the first time and went, this is something that I have something to say. I have a point of view about this. I have something to offer this medium. I wonder if there's something or a collection of things that you can remember.
Probably the best story that sort of relates to that is, so I graduated from college in '86, and there was a little part of me that imagined that, like, when Les Mis, the tour, came to town, I'd audition and be a swing. I don't know why.
You gotta have goals, man.
But, I had a big, booming voice.
Yeah.
And I couldn't dance, so Les Mis was
Les Mis, perfect.
But I did that summer. A couple friends were going to go and perform at a summer stock, paying $100 in Waterville, Maine, $100 a week, and I knew at that point I said, okay, well, I'm intrigued by playing piano, so I'm just going to call this guy out of the blue, this producer, and say, do you need a pianist? And his answer was, and to his credit, he didn't hang up on me, but he basically said, no, we don't need a pianist. We have a pianist, a guy who just got his master's degree from Oberlin, I think, in piano performance. And but he has to miss a week of the 6 weeks or 8 weeks that we were there to go play the Salzburg Festival, because he was a Mozart specialist. And so I said, okay, but he said, but do you play bass? And I said, of course. So I said, yeah, great, I'll play bass for 7 weeks, and for that 1 week I'll take over the piano part. It was 2 pianos, bass, and drums.
Oh my God.
And I went out and bought electric bass, and I kind of figured it out. I'm sure it was terrible.
What show?
Well, we did.
Are you getting
We did. We did 4 shows. It was.
Sorry.
It was Brigadoon, Sound of Music, a chorus line, and Godspell. The usual summer stock thing.
Yeah.
But I remember saying in my head, I'm going to go and I'm going to meet somebody who's a real pianist, and then I'll see that, you know what, I shouldn't be doing this. I'll see what a real pianist is like. And I went, and it took me about 5 minutes to go, I know so much more than this guy, just naturally, my instincts about how music functions dramatically. And it wasn't something I'd ever thought about, but I watched this person make all these just wrong decisions in terms of not listening to the singers, not watching the people on stage, not bringing, something as simple as, we think about this constantly. What word do you bring the underscoring in on?
Yeah.
It really matters. When does the underscoring start? What is the color, the nature of the underscore? Are you playing into the emotion of the scene, or are you playing against the emotion of the scene? And these are constant conversations for all of us. Where do you break, do you sing a verse and chorus and then have dialogue? Or is there a transition? Are we moving somewhere? All of these things, I realized that for whatever reason, and I still don't know why, but I just kind of understood how music should function, and I still do. There's very few things that like Warren was saying, as you get older, you stop saying, no, I know what's right, and you start going, well, okay, I'll listen. One of the things that I feel like I've always knew is like when music starts and why, in the context of a scene. I don't know why that was in my head, but that summer is when I realized it, and that's when I came back to Cambridge the following fall, and started, like as I said, playing Forbidden Broadway, which sort of opened up a whole different world. But it really, that whole idea of why in music, or why something happens, and how it makes us feel. Music has an ineffable quality that we don't understand why it affects us the way it does. But the difference, as to quote Cole Porter, how strange to change from major to minor sometimes. And so much of, like Too Darn Hot, starts out in a minor key and then it goes major for a minute. And it's a very important distinction. So in Love starts out in a minor key and it keeps climbing these half steps. It keeps striving, strange dear. But no, we're not ready to go up any further. Da, da, da. I'm still trying to climb past that. Da, da. And then suddenly I leap. Close to, and then I leap more. It's astonishing what melody can do, what rhythm can do, and then the fact that that song then finally ends in a major key, that tells us so much about the emotional state of that character. And you, the audience, whether you know that consciously or not, you certainly sense it because of the power of music. So.
Absolutely. Okay, I would like to show a little bit. I wish I could show the whole thing, but then you would have nothing to go buy tickets to. The top of Act 2 of Kiss Me, Kate is a well-known number called Too Darn Hot. In the current revival, it is a honest-to-God showstopper at a really funny place because you just came back from intermission and you were just standing, and then all of a sudden, 10 minutes and 45 seconds later, you're leaping to your feet again. It's an extraordinary example of collaboration as far as I'm concerned, and we're going to just watch a little short clip of it and then talk to the gents here about how they went about putting it together. So let's roll that Too Darn Hot clip.
What are we going to see? I don't know.
But when that thermometer goes way up and the weather is sizzling hot, Mr. God, funky squad of a rain, with his queen, O-G-I-I, Jimmy Pie, hey, that is hot.
Cool. Love the dude with the cigarette. It's like one of my favorite bits. I love one of the guys does the whole number basically with the cigarette hanging from his lip. It's amazing. So this is what I love about talking to the three of you because, you know, this is a 32-bar song basically. I mean, it's if you sat down and played it, it would be a minute and a half long, and it's just a sweet little 32-bar jazz tune. And it's 10 minutes and 45 seconds. So where does that conversation begin? Where do you, I mean, you obviously know the responsibility of the number in the play, right? It's the top of Act 2, so it's going to be a big number. It's written to be held up and sort of bringing us back into the story or bringing us back into the mindset or mood of the play or you know, I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but where does that conversation begin?
I mean, I like actors. I love actors and I love dancers. And there was an opportunity to see them at rest and at play, and not in their natural habitat in a way. They're not on stage. They're not acting. They're real people. It's intermission of Taming of the Shrew, and they're in an alleyway. So that was in my head. I love live music, and Scott Ellis had a really good, interesting way in at the top of the play. Like, he wanted to start in silence. He wanted the sound of footsteps. He wanted like a ghost light switched off, and he had I thought it really conjured something. So then when he told me about that idea, I thought, oh man, now I got to do something good to get into top of Act 2. and I do love live music. It's a lot of why I do this. Is I love live music, and I wanted people to be aware of it in a way. And I think it makes me dance in a different way. So I decided that was going to be my way in, and that was one thing I did not discuss. I was not collaborating about that. There was a live musician on that stage, no matter what anybody thought.
You can see him in the corner
up there. You can see little Greg. You can see him. There
He actually
is.
comes out of the orchestra where the band is sitting and starts Act 2 entering on stage with his rolled up shirt sleeves as if he's just come out of the pit
in Baltimore or wherever you were.
in Baltimore,
Yeah.
and sits down outside.
We use it as conversation, quite often for me, and with music, I hear it as dialogue. So David and I went to work constructing this, really finding a magical way in. That was our way of getting the audience back in, or at least of casting a fishing line out and kind of hooking you guys back in. But it was through the music. So that was really where I started, and we started very slowly and very gently, and we went section by section. We listened very carefully to what David did in 1999. There were some parts of that I just loved. I couldn't imagine discarding because I really loved it, and I found it easy to conjure images to and easy to conjure steps. And then we spent a long time. I mean, we spent a good amount of time in a studio together discussing. David would play, I would dance a little bit. We hit the ball back a couple of times, and then Roundabout did a donor event. They wanted a donor event where it was like a Times TED Talk like the anatomy of a musical number.
Yes.
So they gave us basically 5 days in a room with 8 dancers, and with Greg. Sweet Greg was there too. And I started at the top of the number, and we just constructed it with 8, not with 28. And that was really that was really, I think, for me, where it came to life, or where I was able to test drive these ideas, where I was able to test drive Battle of the Sexes and see if it could hold up. And actually, even in that clip, you could actually very
100%.
clearly see, you can see Charisse with that fan, and then she gets the ladies, and here they come, and there go the men, goodbye. Like, there's a very clear, it's funny, having talked about what we've talked about and then watching it, it's quite clear.
But also, like, the thing you said earlier about loving dancers and their individual characteristics, which is something you said too, Dad, like, you see it in even this clip. You see the individual relationship work. I mean, that's what makes it great.
Well, you
to me,
see it
what
in the
makes great
clothes
dancing.
too. I was very strong about that too.
Yep.
Is those women are not cookie cutter. They're not wearing the same color. They're not the same length. They're not the same cut. Charisse, sweet Charisse, who had the fan, she had a baby 3 months before she did this. She's incredible, incredible.
Something we said before about this collaboration or this attitude. I'm not just talking about us, but anybody that does it this way. That's infectious. It goes into everybody. So when these guys are creating something for the first time and he's putting steps on somebody, it's not just a dancer with steps. It's a dancer with a character idea. He does a funny thing that I've never seen anybody else do. What's your name?
Yeah.
What's your name? What's your character name? Who are you in the show? What do you do? And then it'll go away, and we'll be dancing and sweating, and it'll be 5 minutes to 6, and he'll go, oh, by the way, what's your name? And what do you do? And what do you? So these people is why you feel when you see the show, and I hope you all do. Why you feel that this is a group of people that you're allowed to see in their workspace. It's not that Will Chase sings, he's the lead and Kelly's the lead, and now you see the ensemble. Now this is not an ensemble. This is part of a company that's traveling across Italy, and they all and the other incredible thing, because of this thing that goes right straight through the show, is the fact that you recognize. How many times can you walk out of a Broadway show and say, that girl in the blonde and the yellow dress, she was, and then that other guy who came on with the top, you know who they are. You might not know their character names, but you know who they are because you get used to them. You see them in the next scene, you went, oh yes, I know who she's the wardrobe lady, and blah, blah, blah. Because of the way it's set up, but not just because of the passion and commitment of the creative team, because of that infectious thing, that passion to get to communicate goes to them, and they get it. It's like a plague, sort of.
But I think it's true. If you set up a strong collaborative spirit in the creative side of things, that can't help but infect the company with the same kind of energy, and you hope for that. I mean, as a performer, I certainly hope.
You know, when I went out, I didn't get to watch the show for a long time, and Mark is my associate, and I have to, as much as I do give up a show, I hate to give up a show. But as much as I hate to do that, I have to have him ready, because if something happens to me, there's nobody there to conduct. So when I was watching the show a couple of weeks ago, I realized how that permeates the audience, how I'm sitting watching the show. I got into it, and I know the show. and I got into going, look at and I saw all kinds of things I hadn't seen before, just because of their commitment as individuals in this number, which is like, you don't know where to look, almost. Except you do, always with him. You know exactly where to look. He tells you where to look.
So did you guys start with Warren, do you start with an idea and build out, or do you see different things with different pairs? Or, I mean, it sounds like casting has a huge part of bringing stuff into clarity for you, as far as that part.
Generally, I listen a lot. I like to listen.
That's
I like
great.
to listen. And I'll things that David will write will sound masculine to me, or it will sound feminine. There's a partnering section in there that I knew, as soon as I heard it, I knew that was partnering couples. There's another section, 8-1, ba-dee-ba-da, ba-ba-ba-ba, 8-1, ba-dee-ba-da, ba-trill, 8-1, that I knew was three men, because it just sounds like three men. Sounds like three men. And it sounds, and the gaps sound like a show of strength to me. 8-1, ba-dee-ba-da, da-dee-da-da, 8-1, ba-dee-ba-da, but challenge, 8-1, ba-dee-ba-da. So just there are certain pieces of music that appear, that I can visualize very easily, and I just write on my pad, like three men dancing, partner section, girls go get boys. Or here comes, you know, within this number two, there was a different language. That there's a line in the play that says, give a Broadway hoofer a chance to play Shakespeare, and look what happens.
Right.
So because I'd underlined it in my script, I knew that Corbin's language was the language of a Broadway hoofer, and it was not the language of this company. Like, he was outside of the company. And that's one of the things that David and I worked out was his journey from outside of the company to inside of the company. And Bianca, that's another thing that kind of ties up in Bianca. By the end of Bianca, he's accepted into the company. So I knew that Corbin's language, there he is at the top of those steps, Corbin Blue, his language was that of a Broadway hoofer, which allowed me then to go to a different language in the number. So then here comes tap. And then, of course, that led me to like, oh, well, I'm 48, so it could be Nicholas Brothers. Like, how great would that be?
No.
To see that, because we don't see that on Broadway. We can't see that because no one can do it.
I was about to say, you don't see it because
it's extremely rare and extremely difficult. But these two guys, James T. Lane, who you saw in the video, and then Corbin there. So then I fashioned a kind of Nicholas Brothers.
Oh, yeah.
So that was another tent pole that we built within it. And there was not actually a major section within it. It was all in minor keys until David Chase said, "Is it weird? Are we missing something?" And then in the score, it's called the David Chase extension, and it's the one section in the number that's in a minor key, and it became the Nicholas Brothers thing, and actually becomes a big kind of gear shift for us.
Because so much of building, especially a long number, is really about the energy push and pull. And you may have noticed, like, what you didn't see is the whole vocal preceding the dance. You saw just a little bit. But as soon as you finish the vocal, the energy actually comes fairly far down. It goes to just jabs and a walking bass. Why? Because we have to start here. And then we can build. And what's nice is, yes, you can go to the women's section, which has a different sound, or you go to this men's section. And you're also, I mean, music is math. It's about balance. It's about equations as well. I mean, it's also about emotions, but there's a mathematical underpinning, even in the same way that we think of dance steps in terms of eights usually. There's a certain just balance that you have to achieve. So there are times when you go, okay, we need this section to be a little bit longer or a little bit more. We need to go to a different place here, or maybe we change the key here because we're ready for something else. There's one place later in the number where it seems, right at the end of the Nicholas Brothers section, it sort of seems like it buttons, and then there's a big steam blast from the stage floor, and we almost start over. And then from there to the end, it just builds and builds and builds. But it's about shifting these rhythms, shifting these keys, shifting the feel, when Larry Hochman, who did the wonderful orchestrations, gets his part of it is sort of shifting the instrumental colors, which is another big, sort of element to add on here. It's like what I do is in black and white musically. What Larry does is bring the black and white into full living color. So that's a very important element as well. But in terms of just building it, I mean, it might be I'll come in with an idea, he'll respond and say, "Oh, that's great, but can I have, a little more of that?" And "Oh, well, you know what? I need to get from over here to all the way over there, and I want to do it this way. So I need, let's figure out how long we need." And we'll sometimes just put a pin in a certain place, like, okay, and we have to wait till we get on stage, like with Bianca. Yeah. With the tap dancing up and down the steps, we had to go out to a warehouse in, I don't know where,
Connecticut.
Canada. And where they were building the set, and we literally took a bunch of dancers, including Corbin, and we did some of the steps to see, okay, how long will it take to get from point A to point B? Because you've been in a rehearsal studio where the steps are taped out on the floor and everyone's kind of doing this.
And they're all the same, they're taped on the floor, so there's no actual steps.
Or he's taking them out to the stairwell behind the rehearsal room and saying, okay, now let's dance up and down the steps just, to see how long this will take. But sometimes you don't know, and what's great about this sort of collaboration, again, is that it's constant, we're shifting things. We might cut back a little bit here, we might add more here, and it continues all the way through once you add an audience, because an audience very much will tell you when they're eager for more, when they're bored, when they're ahead of you, when you're not being clear enough to them, and that's what you also have to keep doing. So if you're talking about collaboration, I think an audience is very much a part of the collaboration too.
It's a continuing, you're passing the baton the entire time, it sounds like, from...
I mean,
he has the baton.
Well, right, I was...
Yeah, sorry.
But truthfully, in previews, I mean, truly, Bianca, we were working on in previews, and David was still writing, Paul was still adding measures, we were still adding, when I figured out I needed more time to get up the stairs, we were still repeating bars and doing all sorts of that work in previews. Yeah. The girls, when I worked on Bianca, the girls didn't have tap shoes, they bought their shoes from home. They wore their shoes from home that night in the show because we just decided it's going in tonight. I don't care if you don't have a costume, bring your shoes.
Yeah, and there's all sorts of creative ways to okay, we've got a show tonight, but we're in previews, and so Paul says, well, I can repeat these two bars and change this, and he's dictating that, to the band 5 minutes before the show starts, or in the case of when Christine, one of the covers went on, they had music delivered during intermission because she sang it in a different key.
Oh, wow.
You have no idea what happens behind the scenes.
The other thing I wanted to say about that number that they just described, at the end, when it's all together and everybody goes, yeah, that's it, you've got this fantastic story of a group of people, performers, who have been told what to do in Taming the Shrew. They have to be all these places, and there's this incredible sense of freedom in performances, because what they've created is a number about what actors do when they're not being told to move stage right, stage left, upstage, downstage, when they relax, when they have fun. They pretty much do when they do when they're on the stage, especially dancers. But I'm just saying, the story feels so free and airy here out in the alley in 102 temperature in Baltimore. And you don't, as you create these things, you don't go, yeah, you do go, this section needs this section needs that. But if you're thought about it correctly from the beginning, suddenly the story develops, it's just there. It must be what writing a book is like. It just, you start with an idea and suddenly you've got, 9 chapters and it's all, you know what I mean?
As a choreographer, when you read the script, you sing the song once through, like chorus, verse, chorus, bridge, whatever, and then it says, and then they dance.
Right.
That's right. And then you say, what do you mean they dance? Like, what are they dancing about? Why are they dancing? Who's dancing? Like, someone tell me who's dancing. What are they wearing? What's the music? And then they dance. And in the script of Kiss Me Kate, and then they dance. And honestly, 10 minutes later, 10 minutes later, they finish dancing.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's also them. That's not me. That's them. That's credit to them too.
Wow.
They're pretty spectacular.
And
They
what's interesting, in 1948, I think this song was literally a placeholder to make sure everyone got back from intermission.
Yeah.
That it really, because it doesn't really impact on the story
No, it
at
doesn't.
all.
No.
You could cut this, you could brush up your Shakespeare, you could
But you would never cut those songs.
No, but you would never do it. But at the same time, if you were writing a new show right now, you would never write this song. You would never write this situation.
Well, it's not necessary, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, it's not necessary.
It's in place
Yeah.
of an entr'acte, almost.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's just to make sure, okay, the show's starting again. I hear somebody singing. Let's get back to our seat. And so I think in 1948, it was just, it was kind of a nice, fun song that Cole Porter wrote. And it had a dance, but, and I don't know what the original dance, I know what the original dance music was because I've seen that score and people have made recordings of it. The original was orchestrated by Robert Russell Bennett, who is a brilliant orchestrator, but whose understanding of swing ended in 1929. So the original almost sounds like a really bad parody of engine music. Da, da, bum, 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 ba-dum, da, da, boom, da, boom. It's, So one of the fun things, sorry, that's terrible, isn't it? One of the fun things about exploring this song is because it now has a purpose, because the show is about a celebration of the theatrical experience. It has a purpose, it has a goal, and it can be thrilling on its own terms, and it can also be more 1948 than the show was in 1948.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
We have a point of reference now.
Well, because now we know what 1948 sounded
That's
like, so I can do with rhythms and harmonies things that people in Broadway's always 25 years
so.
behind, the times in terms of the latest pop music, generally, give or take. So
Sometimes that's a good thing.
yes, yeah, yeah, it's true. But what sort of doing a revival allows you to do is go back and look at really what did they look like dancing in 1948? What did the music sound like? And not that we want to replicate that, but if we know that, and thank God for YouTube and Spotify and all those things, because we can hear all that, at our fingertips. We know so much more about what it sounded like then, and then we can be that much more informed about how we in 2019 make it sound the way for this audience that hopefully it felt for that audience then.
Somebody asked me recently, because they came to see this show, and a very intelligent man, he's a brain surgeon at Mount Sinai, and he reads a lot and he's a good musician. What do you think is the biggest change in Broadway? And I said, well, the biggest change that I can think of is the music's not all the same. Let me clarify that. There used to be something called a Broadway sound, which meant that if you listened to South Pacific and Damn Yankees and something else, Sound of Music, I didn't want to use the same composer. Anyway, you get the point. Different musicals, they all basically orchestrally sound the same, right? So one of the great things that you could now do, because of this information that we have, is like in this show, when it's Elizabethan music or when it's Shakespearean in feeling that where we're going in the show, or we're in the next, or if we're in Italy, we can actually do that. We can actually, go ahead and make it sound, use recorders and make the music a little bit more period. And then when we're in the swingland, we swingland. And then when we're in Zoneland, that never used to be done. If you listen to Gypsy and you listen to Sugar and you listen to South Pacific, not so much Rodgers and Hammerstein because of the material they wrote. It was all sort of, I don't mean it's the same, don't get me wrong, but it's the same idea musically, meaning it wasn't jazzy. It all sounded like the same composer wrote it, or at least the same orchestrator did it. Now you have a lot of different colors that you're able to play with, which from my standpoint is great, because it gives the entire picture of the musical, of what's happening. It's telling a story like a movie would tell it, as opposed to, okay, there's 4 trumpets, 2 trombones, 5 saxes, and 6 strings, and that's your orchestra, no matter what music you're playing. So that makes no sense. It never made any sense. But one of the things that David reminded me of is listening to a recording, like the original recording of this with Alfred Drake and Patricia Morrison, and listening to the orchestration. They're okay. I mean, there's nothing wrong with them. He's a brilliant orchestrator, but you go, God, the colors you're missing. That's because I didn't grow up in 1948, I don't think. Anyway, I just want to throw that in there.
But also, I'd just add to that, which I think is interesting, it's like the pressure's off, Cole Porter could also be played on the radio all the time back then.
That's right. That's
And
correct.
so those songs, Too Darn Hot is not being played on the radio right now, to all of our ears' disappointments. But you know what I mean? It's just not the same kind of, the functionality of the music is very different in popular culture, and there's just more options. So in a way, when you look at a revival score, it can open your mind because it doesn't have the pressure of having to serve some commercial master in a really interesting way.
Exactly.
Well, this has been fascinating. I could nerd out like this all day long. I just want to thank all 3 of you for being here, Paul Gemignani, Warren Carlyle, and David Chase. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you. To send us off tonight, we have another fantastic performer from Kiss Me Kate. We did Oklahoma at the Muni together. That's what I remembered. But I have some credits of his written down, so I don't want to blow it. Preston Truman Boyd was on Broadway in The Play That Goes Wrong, Sunset Boulevard, She Loves Me with you guys, on the 20th Century, Bullets Over Broadway, and Big Fish. He's a fantastic, fantastic performer in the track in the show, but also is the understudy for Will Chase. So he'll be doing a song tonight that Fred/Petruchio sings called Where Is the Life That Late I Led, accompanied again by the fantastic Mark Mitchell. So please welcome back. Yeah, dude, I'll hug you.
Since I've reached the charming age of puberty and began to finger feminine girls, like a shore that's typically Schuberty, I have always had a multitude of girls. But now that a married man at last am I, how aware of my dear departed past am I? Where is the life that late I led? Where is it now? Totally dead. Where is the fun I used to find? Where is it gone? Gone with the wind. A married life may all be well, but raising an heir could never compare with raising a bit of hell. So I repeat what first I said. Where is the life that late I in dear Milano? Where are you, Momo? Still selling the scriptures of the pictures in the Duomo. And sweet Lucretia, where are you, Lisha? You gave a new peddling all your peats in the streets of Taormina. And in Firenze, where are you, Alice? Still there in your pretty, itty, bitty, pitty palace. And sweet Lucretia, so young and gay. What scandalous doings in the ruins of Pompeii. Where is the life that late I led? Where is it now? day it's easy to play, but oh, what a bore at night. So I repeat what first I said. Where is the life that late I? Where is Rebecca, my Becky Vecchio? Could still she be cruising that amusing Ponte Vecchio? Where is Fedora, the wild Virago? It's lucky I missed a gangster sister from Chicago. Where is Venetia, who loved to chat so? Could still she be drinking in her stinking pink palazzo? And lovely Lisa, where are you, Lisa? You gave a new meaning to the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Where is the life that late I led? Where is it now? Totally dead. Where is the fun I used to find? Where is it gone? Gone with the wind. I've oft been told of nuptial bliss, but what do you do? 1:45, with only a shrew to kiss. So I repeat what first I said. Where is the life that
Preston, Truman Boyd, and the fantastic Mark Mitchell at the piano. Thank you all so much for coming. Thank again Paul Gemignani, Warren Carlyle, and David Chase for being with us tonight to discuss Kiss Me Kate. Join us in 2 weeks to talk about Be More Chill on April 15th. Thanks, I'm Alex Gemignani. Have a great night.